You will work 50 years and still be broke if you chase money without a clear purpose. Wealth comes to those who master their mind, not just their labor. Desire, persistence, and definite plans turn dreams into fortune. Stop trading time for money. Make your mind the engine of success. Remember, it's not how hard you work, but how smart your mind works for you. 1. Working hard without a clear purpose keeps you trapped in poverty. 2. Wealth begins in the mind, not in labor alone. 3. Desire, persistence, and definite plans create lasting fortune. 4. Trading time for money limits your true potential. 5. Smart thinking beats hard work every time. Working hard without a clear purpose is like rowing a boat endlessly in the middle of the ocean without a destination, expending tremendous effort yet going nowhere. And the truth is that many people labor their entire lives, waking up every day, putting in hours upon hours of sweat and toil, thinking that effort alone guarantees wealth and success, only to find themselves at the end of decades with nothing to show for it, trapped in a cycle of financial struggle that seems impossible to escape. And this is precisely why the truly wealthy understand that effort without direction is wasted energy. It is not the number of hours you put into work or the intensity with which you perform menial tasks that determines your fortune, but the clarity of purpose, the definiteness of your goal, and the focused application of your mind toward a well-defined objective, because the human mind, when left unguided, drifts, entertains distractions, and accepts mediocrity as normal. Yet the same mind, when trained, disciplined, and aligned with a precise aim, becomes a magnet for opportunity, ideas, and solutions that lead inexorably to success. And this is why people who work tirelessly, but without a concrete plan or a burning desire, often remain in poverty, while others, with less physical exertion but far greater mental focus, amass fortunes and live lives of abundance, illustrating that money and achievement are not rewards for mere labor, but for the intelligent, persistent, and purposeful application of thought. Many are fooled by society's message that effort equals reward, that if you simply work hard enough, the universe will eventually repay you. Yet reality proves otherwise repeatedly, because millions of people rise early, labor through exhaustion, yet fall short of financial freedom, illustrating the stark difference between activity and productivity, between movement and meaningful progress. And understanding this distinction is the first step toward breaking free from a life of unending struggle, because without a central aim, without a burning desire, and without a definite plan, work becomes a treadmill, exhausting your energy while producing minimal results. And this is where mindset becomes everything, because those who succeed long-term learn early to harness their thoughts, focus their mental faculties, and dedicate every action, decision, and effort to advancing toward a clearly defined objective, rather than scattering their energies on tasks that yield no lasting benefit. And this alignment of purpose and action acts as a force multiplier, transforming ordinary labor into extraordinary results, because the law of success is simple yet unforgiving. Clarity of purpose directs energy, and energy directed intelligently produces wealth, while energy wasted or aimlessly applied produces only frustration, fatigue, and continued poverty. Consider the countless examples throughout history of men and women who struggled for decades with hard work yet remained broke simply because they lacked focus, because their efforts were scattered, inconsistent, or misaligned with a central vision. And compare them to those who discovered a single dominant purpose, a goal that ignited passion, concentrated their mental powers, and refused to be swayed by distractions or temporary setbacks. And you will see that success is not a product of luck or circumstance, but of purpose-driven action, because a person with a burning goal knows exactly why they are working, what they hope to achieve, and how every task, every challenge, and every setback contributes to the eventual attainment of that goal. And in contrast, the aimless worker, no matter how diligent, drifts endlessly, reacting to life rather than directing it, spending years on activities that produce no compounding effect, no growth, no leverage, no accumulation of wealth or influence, and this is why millions remain in the same financial position year after year despite their relentless labor, because labor without direction is like pouring water into a bucket with holes. The effort is there, but the result leaks away, wasted, unproductive, and understanding this principle is essential for anyone who desires not merely to survive, but to thrive, to escape the trap of mediocrity, and to achieve financial and personal freedom, because once the mind is trained to focus on a definite purpose, every action becomes meaningful. Every obstacle becomes a teacher, every failure becomes a stepping stone, and every ounce of effort compounds into tangible results. And this is why it is said that the man who knows exactly what he wants and pursues it relentlessly, guided by a definite purpose, can accomplish more in a few years than the aimless worker can in decades, because clarity of purpose channels energy, multiplies effort, and attracts the circumstances, people, and opportunities that accelerate success, while lack of purpose dissipates energy, causes indecision, invites distractions, and leaves the worker spinning his wheels endlessly, achieving little despite immense effort. And the path out of this trap is not mysterious nor complicated. It begins with introspection, asking oneself the fundamental questions of life. What do I truly desire? Why do I want it? And how will I achieve it? Because without these answers, no amount of labor can substitute for the directionless toil that keeps so many trapped in financial struggle. Yet once these questions are answered, the mind gains clarity, the will is strengthened, and the work becomes purposeful, deliberate, and aligned with a vision that grows stronger every day, because a definite aim ignites passion, and passion fuels persistence, and persistence guarantees that temporary setbacks, failures, and discouragements are seen not as insurmountable obstacles but as part of the natural process of achieving greatness, and this understanding transforms ordinary effort into extraordinary achievement, for no one becomes wealthy simply by working hard. Wealth is the result of directed effort, intelligent planning, focused execution, and unwavering faith in one's ability to achieve the purpose one has chosen. And as you consider your own life, it is critical to reflect on whether your daily labor is advancing you toward your dreams or merely keeping you busy, because busy work does not equal progress, activity does not equal achievement, and without purpose, even the hardest work produces little lasting value, while the man or woman with a definite goal, a burning desire, and a clear plan channels every action, every thought, and every decision toward the attainment of that purpose, and in doing so, transforms ordinary energy into extraordinary results, attracting opportunities, ideas, and alliances that further accelerate the journey to success. And this principle is universal, unchanging, and unforgiving, applying to every human being who wishes to achieve financial independence and personal fulfillment. Because without purpose, labor is wasted. With purpose, labor becomes a catalyst for wealth, freedom, and the life you truly desire, and it is in this fundamental truth that the key to escaping poverty, achieving abundance, and living a meaningful, successful life resides. For once you commit to a definite purpose, align your energy with it, and pursue it with unwavering persistence, you will discover that universe conspires in your favor, doors open where none seem to exist, solutions appear to problems that once seemed insurmountable, and the fruits of your labor no longer elude you, because now your work is directed, powerful, and magnified by clarity, focus, and a burning desire to succeed. And it is this combination of purpose, focus, and persistent action that separates the majority who work endlessly and remain broke from the few who achieve extraordinary wealth and fulfillment, and therefore, to anyone who is willing to listen, to anyone who dares to reflect honestly on their life. The message is simple yet profound. Stop working aimlessly, define your purpose, align your efforts with a clear goal, and direct your mind and energy toward it every single day, because only then will your hard work stop being wasted and start producing the wealth, abundance, and success you were meant to achieve. And it is this understanding, applied consistently, that transforms a lifetime of struggle into a lifetime of achievement, and a life of mediocrity into a life of extraordinary accomplishment. Wealth begins in the mind, not in labor alone, and this is a truth that has been overlooked by millions who believe that success is measured solely by the number of hours they spend working, the sweat they pour into their tasks, or the physical effort they exert daily. But the reality is that money, opportunity, and lasting prosperity are first conceived, nurtured, and brought into being by the human mind, because every fortune that exists today began as a thought, an idea, a vision that someone dared to entertain and develop with unwavering belief. And yet, too many people confine themselves to the notion that working harder, longer, and more relentlessly is the key to wealth, failing to recognize that effort without creative, directed thinking is like trying to plant a garden by scattering seeds randomly in barren soil, expecting a lush harvest to emerge by chance. And understanding that wealth begins in the mind requires a shift in perspective, a realization that the mind is the true engine of success, the laboratory in which ideas are forged into reality, the fertile ground from which all forms of material abundance grow, and the power of thought cannot be overstated, because the mind, when properly directed, attracts circumstances, opportunities, people, and resources that are necessary for the realization of one's goals. Yet when the mind is idle, unfocused, or filled with doubt, fear, and negativity, it becomes a prison, locking its owner in mediocrity and financial struggle. And this principle is why so many individuals spend decades laboring with little to show for their effort, while others, perhaps working fewer hours or exerting less physical energy, achieve extraordinary wealth because they have learned to cultivate their minds, to think clearly, creatively, and strategically, to visualize the outcomes they desire, and to act in ways that align with these mental visions, because thought is the starting point of all achievement, the blueprint upon which all success is built. And understanding this truth transforms approach to life from mere survival to deliberate creation, because the person who trains their mind to see possibilities rather than obstacles, to focus on solutions rather than problems, and to think in terms of opportunity rather than limitation, immediately gains a powerful advantage over those who rely solely on physical labor, luck, or circumstance. And the development of a wealthy mindset involves more than simply wishing for riches. It requires the cultivation of specific mental habits, the discipline to control thoughts, the persistence to maintain focus on a definite purpose, and the courage to act on ideas even when the path is uncertain or fraught with difficulty, because it is through this combination of thought and action that ideas are transformed into tangible results, fortunes, and lasting prosperity. And the mind's creative power is limitless when properly harnessed, because every invention, every business, every enterprise, every form of wealth that has ever existed was first imagined in someone's mind, carefully planned, tested, and executed with persistent action. And this is why education, self-development, reading, reflection, and constant learning are not optional but essential for anyone seeking true financial freedom, because the mind must be nourished, trained, and expanded to recognize opportunities, to invent solutions, to anticipate trends, and to create value in ways that the untrained mind cannot even perceive. And those who fail to develop their mental faculties are doomed to follow the whims of circumstance, drifting aimlessly through life, relying on chance, luck, or the decisions of others, and as a result, remain trapped in the cycle of laboring endlessly for insufficient reward, whereas those who consciously cultivate a wealth-oriented mindset attract ideas, solutions, strategies, and people that multiply their efforts, amplify their results, and accelerate their path to abundance, because the law of attraction, though often misunderstood, operates according to the nature of thought. Thoughts held consistently with emotion and clarity tend to manifest in reality, and therefore, thinking in terms of wealth, opportunity, and creative solutions is not mere optimism or wishful thinking. It is the precise mechanism through which prosperity is brought into being, and this is why it is imperative to guard one's mind against negative influences, toxic beliefs, and limiting self-concepts, because thoughts are seeds, and every seed planted in the mind grows in accordance with its nature, producing outcomes that correspond exactly to the quality, focus, and persistence of the mental input. And this is where education, mentorship, and continuous learning play a critical role, because exposure to ideas, strategies, and perspectives that expand the mind accelerates its ability to generate wealth, create solutions, and seize opportunities that others overlook. And the distinction between labor and mental creation becomes clear when we study the lives of the world's most successful individuals, because their physical effort alone does not explain their achievements. Rather, it is the deliberate, creative, persistent, and disciplined application of thought, combined with focused action, that generates extraordinary results, and the mind, when trained to think in terms of abundance, opportunity, and strategic action, becomes a magnet, attracting circumstances, alliances, knowledge, and resources that would never come to someone whose mental focus is scattered, negative, or undisciplined. And therefore, the cultivation of wealth begins not with a job, a business, or even a large investment, but with the conscious, deliberate, and consistent development of the mind, because a powerful mind produces ideas, ideas produce plans, plans produce actions, actions produce results, and results compound into lasting wealth and freedom, and this process is predictable, repeatable, and available to anyone willing to think, learn, and act with purpose, persistence, and intelligence, because every great fortune, every significant achievement, every life of abundance and influence began with a thought, a vision, a mental picture of what could be, followed by focused action, relentless persistence, and unwavering faith in its eventual realization. And the difference between those who succeed and those who merely work lies in this understanding. For the worker who relies solely on labor, effort, or endurance will always find themselves limited by the physical constraints of time and energy, whereas the person who begins with the mind, who conceives, plans, strategizes, and executes with clarity and focus, leverages every hour, every effort, and every resource to create multiple streams of value, income, and influence, multiplying the results far beyond what physical labor alone could ever achieve. And this is why it is said that wealth is a state of mind first and foremost, a mental construct that precedes material reality, because the brain, properly directed, becomes a factory for solutions, ideas, and opportunities, and without it, no amount of physical work, no amount of laborious effort, and no amount of time can substitute for the focused, creative, persistent application of thought. And therefore, anyone who wishes to achieve financial freedom, personal growth, and lasting prosperity must begin by taking control of their mind, cultivating thoughts of abundance, focusing on a definite purpose, learning relentlessly, visualizing success, and directing their actions in harmony with their mental vision, because when the mind is harnessed in this way, wealth becomes inevitable, obstacles become opportunities, failures become lessons, and every action, decision, and thought compounds to create a life of extraordinary achievement, abundance, and freedom. And understanding this principle separates the majority who struggle endlessly from the few who create, innovate, and build lasting legacies, because wealth, opportunity, and success do not arrive by chance nor by sheer labor, but by the intelligent, purposeful, and persistent use of the mind as the origin of all creation. And this is why the cultivation of mental power, clarity, focus, and disciplined thinking is not optional for those who aspire to greatness, but the very foundation upon which every fortune, every achievement, and every extraordinary life is built. And those who embrace this truth, who commit themselves to thinking, planning, and acting with purpose, are the ones who turn their visions into reality, their dreams into fortunes, and their efforts into lasting, meaningful wealth. Because when the mind is trained, disciplined, and directed toward a definite purpose, it becomes the ultimate tool for creation, the ultimate source of opportunity, and the ultimate foundation for a life of abundance, freedom, and achievement. And this understanding, applied consistently, transforms ordinary lives into extraordinary legacies, demonstrating clearly that wealth truly begins in the mind, and only in the mind, long before it ever appears in a bank account, a ledger, or a material possession. Financial education is more valuable than hard work alone, and this is a principle that too few people truly understand, for the world is filled with individuals who labor tirelessly from dawn to dusk, who sacrifice sleep, comfort, and leisure in the belief that the sheer intensity of their effort will eventually produce wealth, yet despite their diligence, they remain trapped in mediocrity, struggling paycheck to paycheck, unable to break free from the cycle of financial frustration, because they have overlooked the critical distinction between working hard and working wisely. The truth being that knowledge, understanding, and the ability to make informed financial decisions are what truly multiply the results of effort. And while hard work may create temporary progress, without the strategic application of financial intelligence, that progress is fragile, unsustainable, and often fleeting, because the forces of inflation, debt, mismanagement, and opportunity cost will erode gains that are not guided by financial insight. And this is why the most successful people in history, from industrial magnates to modern entrepreneurs, have always prioritized learning, understanding, and mastering the principles of money, investing, and wealth creation over the mere act of labor. For labor alone, no matter how relentless, cannot create leverage, cannot produce passive income, and cannot generate the compounding effects that financial literacy enables. And financial education begins with understanding the fundamental laws that govern money, such as the power of saving, investing, and compounding, the importance of understanding risk versus reward, the mechanics of debt, the strategies of asset accumulation, and the psychology of wealth, because these principles, when internalized and applied, enable the individual to convert effort into value that multiplies exponentially rather than linearly. And those who fail to acquire this knowledge are like laborers attempting to build a grand mansion with nothing but bare hands and intuition, unaware that tools, blueprints, and techniques exist that could make their efforts far more productive, precise, and rewarding. And acquiring financial education is not merely about reading a book or attending a course, though these are valuable, but about developing the capacity to think critically about money, to analyze opportunities, to identify risks, to leverage knowledge into action, and to apply lessons consistently over time, because the true advantage of financial intelligence lies not only in knowing what to do, but in consistently doing it while avoiding mistakes that the uneducated make repeatedly. And this is why many people, despite working tirelessly for decades, remain broke, while others, perhaps working fewer hours, achieve extraordinary financial success, because the latter have learned to harness knowledge, insight, and strategy as tools to amplify effort and produce results far beyond what labor alone could achieve. And financial education also involves understanding the difference between assets and liabilities, the importance of cash flow, the necessity of building multiple streams of income, and the value of protecting and growing wealth intelligently. Because without these principles, even high income is often consumed by expenses, debts, and poor decisions, leaving little to show for years of labor, and this is why the focus must shift from simply earning more to understanding how money works, how to make it work for you, and how to make it grow intelligently, because labor without understanding is like planting seeds in infertile soil, whereas knowledge allows the mind to recognize fertile ground, choose the right seeds, and apply the proper techniques for growth, and the acquisition of financial education is a lifelong process, involving study, reflection, observation, mentorship, and application. Because the financial world is constantly changing, new opportunities arise, old strategies become obsolete, and those who do not continuously educate themselves are eventually left behind and beyond technical knowledge. Financial education also requires the cultivation of mental traits such as discipline, patience, focus, and resilience, because even the best strategies fail when executed by an undisciplined mind, and the mastery of emotions, the ability to delay gratification, the capacity to resist consumer pressures, and the persistence to act on long-term plans are all essential components of financial intelligence, and these traits, combined with knowledge, create an almost unstoppable force capable of producing wealth and security in ways that raw labor never could. And it is important to note that financial education is not about becoming greedy, manipulative, or unethical, but about understanding the principles of value creation, responsible risk-taking, and intelligent management, because wealth, when created ethically and strategically, becomes a tool for freedom, growth, and ability to make a meaningful impact on one's own life and the lives of others. And those who invest in their financial education, who study, apply, and adapt, discover that money is not scarce, that opportunities exist everywhere for those with knowledge and vision, and that the difference between scarcity and abundance is rarely about external conditions, but about the mindset, understanding, and skill set of the individual, and therefore, anyone who desires true financial freedom must commit to lifelong learning, to acquiring and applying knowledge about earning, saving, investing, and protecting money, to understanding markets, systems, and trends, to recognizing value where others see risk, and to acting decisively on this knowledge, because only then does effort transform into wealth, struggle transform into opportunity, and labor transform into lasting prosperity. And this is why the world's wealthiest people consistently prioritize financial education above all else, because they understand that working harder alone cannot create wealth, but working intelligently, informed by knowledge and insight, exponentially multiplies results, mitigates risk, and produces freedom and security. And the individual who embraces this principle, who commits to understanding the mechanics of money, who applies lessons strategically and persistently, and who develops the mental discipline to act on knowledge consistently, becomes capable of creating wealth far beyond what physical labor alone could ever achieve. And ultimately, this is the lesson that separates those who merely work for money from those who make money work for them, because the true key to financial success lies not in the number of hours spent working, but in the quality of financial education, the ability to think strategically, the courage to act intelligently, and the commitment to lifelong learning, reflection, and improvement. And understanding this distinction, internalizing it, and applying it relentlessly is the path to lasting wealth, freedom, and the ability to live life on one's own terms, proving beyond doubt that financial education is not just valuable, it is far more important than hard work alone, because without it, even the greatest effort can leave one broke, frustrated, and trapped in a cycle of labor, whereas with it, effort is amplified, results are multiplied, and wealth becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Surrounding yourself with people who think like winners is one of the most powerful yet often overlooked principles of success, because human beings are inherently influenced by the minds, attitudes, and habits of those they spend the most time with, and this influence can either elevate or diminish the trajectory of one's life, for every individual, no matter how talented, intelligent, or disciplined, is constantly shaped by the energy, beliefs, and perspectives of the people around them. And those who fail to choose their associations wisely often find themselves pulled into mediocrity, complacency, or even self-defeating behavior, while those who deliberately align themselves with individuals who possess vision, ambition, persistence, and positive thinking discover that their own mindset, motivation, and opportunities expand exponentially because success is contagious, and the habits, attitudes, and language of high achievers naturally influence those in their circle, leading to a shift in thinking, increased confidence, better decision making, and a stronger desire to achieve. And yet, many people underestimate the significance of this truth, believing that talent, education, or hard work alone are enough to guarantee success, when in reality, these qualities often fall short if the surrounding environment is filled with negativity, doubt, procrastination, or complacency, for the mind absorbs influence like a sponge, and when immersed in pessimism, hesitation, or defeatist thinking, even the most capable individuals struggle to act decisively, maintain focus, or persevere through challenges, whereas exposure to ambitious, determined, and like-minded individuals fosters a mindset of possibility, courage, and relentless action. And surrounding yourself with winners is not simply about networking or forming superficial friendships, but about intentionally creating an environment where excellence is modeled, expectations are high, ideas are challenged, accountability is upheld, and support is given to encourage progress. For in such a setting, personal growth is accelerated, opportunities are more visible, and the natural human tendency toward mediocrity is counteracted by consistent exposure to those who exemplify higher standards, and the principle extends beyond professional ambition, because human beings are emotional and social creatures whose attitudes, beliefs, and habits are profoundly influenced by peers, mentors, and collaborators, and therefore, the quality of one's associations directly shapes the quality of one's thoughts, decisions, and ultimately, results, and this is why successful people invest considerable time and effort in carefully choosing their circles, attending events, joining groups, and building relationships with individuals who challenge, inspire, and elevate them. And by doing so, they create a feedback loop in which success breeds success, confidence breeds confidence, and innovation breeds innovation, whereas isolation or association with negative thinkers produces stagnation, self-doubt, and missed opportunities. And surrounding yourself with winners also means engaging with those who demonstrate resilience in the face of adversity, optimism when confronted with obstacles, and strategic thinking when navigating uncertainty, because these qualities are contagious and instructive, providing a living example of how to respond to life's inevitable challenges. And in addition, high-achieving individuals often introduce one to opportunities, partnerships, insights, and resources that would be invisible or inaccessible to someone operating in isolation or with a limiting social circle. And this exposure not only accelerates growth, but also fosters a mindset of abundance, illustrating that success is not a zero-sum game, that collaboration can amplify results, and that learning from the experience of others is a shortcut to mastery. And yet, this principle requires discernment, because not every ambitious or seemingly successful individual is a positive influence, and one must cultivate the ability to identify those whose character, values, and vision align with one's own, because spending time with people who appear successful but lack integrity, humility, or ethical standards can lead to compromise, distraction, and failure, whereas aligning with those who combine ambition with principle, courage with discipline, and vision with action produces a synergistic effect that propels one forward in ways that effort alone cannot achieve. And the act of surrounding oneself with winners also reinforces self-belief, because when consistently interacting with individuals who think strategically, take responsibility, and act decisively, one begins to internalize these traits, developing confidence in one's own ability to think, plan, and execute at a higher level, and over time, this self-reinforcing environment shapes identity, habits, and world, gradually replacing limiting beliefs with empowering one's doubts with determination and hesitation with decisive action, and it is important to recognize that this principle applies across all areas of life, including personal development, financial success, health, relationships, and contribution, because human beings do not compartmentalize influence, and the attitudes, behaviors, and thinking patterns absorbed in one domain inevitably spill over into others, creating a holistic transformation when applied intentionally. And further, the concept of surrounding oneself with winners extends to mentorship, study, observation, and even the consumption of media, literature, and experiences, because all sources of influence contribute to the mental environment, shaping perception, decision, making, and action, and to neglect this is to invite mediocrity through passive exposure to negative or uninspiring influences, whereas deliberate selection of positive, ambitious, and visionary influences fosters clarity of purpose, strategic thinking, and relentless pursuit of meaningful goals. And those who embrace this principle also understand the power of accountability, because being surrounded by individuals who hold high standards, challenge assumptions, and provide constructive feedback encourages one to act consistently, measure progress, and course correct when necessary, and this, in turn, strengthens discipline, focus, and resilience, essential traits for navigating the inevitable obstacles on the path to achievement. And one must also recognize that surrounding oneself with winners is not a one-time action but a continuous process involving evaluation of relationships, proactive engagement with inspiring individuals, letting go of toxic associations, and constantly seeking to elevate one's social and intellectual environment, for the quality of one's associations is not static, and those who do not maintain vigilance risk slipping back into mediocrity through gradual exposure to negative influence. And as this principle becomes a habitual part of life, it produces compounding results, because the influence of winners, when internalized, becomes part of one's own thinking, habits, and decision making, transforming both mindset and outcomes. And ultimately, surrounding yourself with people who think like winners is not merely a strategy for success, but a fundamental law of human behavior and achievement, for no individual can rise above the mental environment they inhabit consistently. And by choosing to immerse oneself in a culture of ambition, excellence, resilience, and positive action, one harnesses the power of collective thought, inspiration, and accountability, achieving far more than isolated effort. And as such, this principle serves as a cornerstone for every aspiring achiever, demonstrating that success is rarely a solo endeavor, that the people around you profoundly influence your results, and that deliberate association with winners is one of the most practical, powerful, and transformative decisions one can make in the pursuit of lasting wealth, personal mastery, and meaningful impact, proving that the company you keep is not a mere social preference but a critical determinant of destiny. And those who internalize this truth act upon it consistently and cultivate an environment filled with ambitious, ethical, and visionary individuals, position themselves for extraordinary achievement, because the mind, when nurtured, challenged, and inspired by winners, becomes a magnet for opportunity, a crucible for innovation, and a source of unstoppable momentum that turns dreams into reality, obstacles into lessons, and potential into measurable success. And it is this principle, applied relentlessly and wisely, that separates those who merely dream from those who achieve, those who drift from those who lead, and those who struggle from those who prosper, and therefore anyone who desires to break free from mediocrity, to accelerate their growth, and to realize their fullest potential must begin with the conscious, intentional, and persistent effort to surround themselves with people who think like winners, for in doing so, they do not merely gain friends or associates. They gain mentors, models, inspiration, accountability, and the mental environment necessary to achieve greatness in any area of life, proving beyond question that the company one keeps is not just important, it is essential for success, because your environment shapes your thoughts shape your actions, and your actions determine your destiny, and the individual who understands, embraces, and acts on this principle positions themselves to achieve extraordinary results that hard work alone could never accomplish, because the influence of winners amplifies effort, accelerates learning, and transforms potential into tangible achievement, demonstrating that the path to wealth, mastery, and personal fulfillment is inseparable from the quality of minds and attitudes one allows into their life. And this is the timeless wisdom that Napoleon Hill so passionately advocated, that success is cultivated not in isolation, but in the fertile soil of positive, ambitious, and like-minded individuals whose energy, vision, and discipline propel one to heights that would otherwise remain unreachable. Taking full responsibility for your financial life is a principle that, when truly embraced, transforms not only one's wealth but one's mindset, character, and destiny, because the moment an individual stops blaming circumstances, luck, the government, the economy, or other people for their financial situation and instead accepts that they and they alone are the architects of their economic reality, everything begins to shift. For many people drift through life with a passive approach to money, waiting for opportunities to fall into their lap, hoping that a raise, inheritance, or windfall will solve their problems, or expecting that external factors will dictate their prosperity, and yet, this mindset is the foundation of perpetual struggle and mediocrity, because wealth, like any other outcome worth achieving, is the direct result of deliberate, informed, and consistent action combined with personal accountability, and to abdicate responsibility is to surrender control over one's life to forces outside oneself, a position that inevitably leads to disappointment, frustration, and the endless cycle of financial struggle, whereas those who consciously accept that every financial decision, habit, and strategy is their responsibility begin to see the world through a lens of opportunity, action, and empowerment, because they understand that the power to change their economic reality is not in the hands of others but entirely within their own, and this principle extends far beyond mere budgeting or income generation, encompassing mindset, habits, relationships, planning, education, and resilience, because the individual who owns their financial life constantly seeks to learn, grow, and optimize every aspect of their economic behavior, recognizing that knowledge without action is useless, and that responsibility without initiative is meaningless. And in accepting this responsibility, one begins to recognize patterns of self-sabotage, poor habits, and unproductive thinking that have kept them trapped. For human beings are creatures of habit, and financial outcomes are almost always the cumulative result of daily decisions, whether small or large, conscious or unconscious, and the individual who refuses to take responsibility often ignores this truth, rationalizing overspending, procrastination, or avoidance as acceptable, whereas those who take responsibility scrutinize every habit, belief, and action through the lens of financial consequence, making deliberate choices, learning from mistakes, and cultivating behaviors that produce long-term wealth. And yet, taking full responsibility also demands a profound level of honesty and courage, because one must confront uncomfortable truths about past decisions, missed opportunities, and personal limitations without falling into self-pity or blame, and this introspection, though difficult, is the gateway to empowerment, because only by seeing clearly where one stands can one chart a path to where one wishes to go, and this principle also necessitates a proactive mindset. For the responsible individual does not wait for circumstances to improve, but takes initiative to educate themselves, create multiple streams of income, seek mentors, leverage resources, invest wisely, and continually expand their financial intelligence, recognizing that wealth is not an accident but a skill, a craft, and a discipline that requires attention, strategy, and personal ownership. And taking responsibility also transforms how one approaches risk, because when you understand that outcomes of your financial actions are yours to own, you also recognize that calculated risks are opportunities for growth, learning, and accelerated results, and fear of loss diminishes as you understand that every failure or setback is a teacher, not a verdict, and that owning your financial life means facing these experiences head on, extracting lessons, adapting strategies, and persisting with renewed insight. And this mindset naturally cultivates discipline, because when you accept responsibility, you understand that your long-term prosperity depends on consistent, intentional action, on avoiding impulsive decisions, on managing expenses, on saving and investing wisely, on continuously improving skills, and on aligning daily behavior with financial goals. And unlike those who drift, blame, or hope, the responsible individual becomes a master of habits, a planner of strategy, and a relentless executor of ideas, because they know that wealth is not built by luck, by external validation, or by waiting for favorable conditions, but by deliberate choices, informed actions, and unwavering accountability. And moreover, taking full responsibility for your financial life has profound psychological effects, because it instills confidence, self-reliance, and a sense of control, eliminating the victim mentality and replacing it with empowerment, creativity, and problem solving. And this shift in identity is perhaps the most valuable outcome, because the person who believes in their power to influence outcomes naturally attracts opportunities, ideas, collaborations, and resources that were invisible to them before, demonstrating that responsibility is not a burden but a magnet for growth and abundance. And furthermore, this principle teaches the importance of planning and vision, because responsible individuals do not simply react to immediate needs or emergencies, but proactively design their financial future with clarity, goals, timelines, and strategies, understanding that wealth is a long-term endeavor requiring foresight, patience, and relentless execution. And it also teaches adaptability, because those who own their financial life recognize that circumstances, markets, and personal situations will change, and their responsibility requires them to adjust, innovate, and persist in the face of uncertainty, rather than relinquishing control to fear, confusion, or external factors. And taking responsibility also means cultivating integrity, ethics, and accountability, not just in oneself, but in relationships, partnerships, and financial dealings. Because trust, reputation, and credibility are critical assets in the creation of lasting wealth. And those who neglect this face limitations, lost opportunities, and unnecessary obstacles, whereas the responsible individual leverages ethical behavior as a strategic advantage, knowing that every transaction, relationship, and interaction shapes the trajectory of their financial life. And principle extends to mindset as well, because those who take responsibility understand that abundance and scarcity are not determined solely by the outside world, but by beliefs, attitudes, and focus. And by controlling these internal variables, they create conditions for prosperity to manifest. And this requires constant self-awareness, reflection, and adjustment, because old habits, limiting beliefs, or emotional reactions can undermine even the most carefully crafted plans. And only by owning every aspect of one's financial life can one maintain consistent progress, resilience, and Alignment with goals and, importantly, taking responsibility fosters independence and freedom, because when you know that you are the primary architect of your financial reality, you no longer rely on others' decisions, whims, or generosity to determine your well-being, and this autonomy allows for creativity, innovation, and courageous decision-making because the fear of dependency or limitation no longer dictates choices. And finally, this principle is the bedrock upon which all lasting financial success is built, because no strategy, investment, education, or opportunity can compensate for a lack of personal ownership, and those who internalize this truth, act on it consistently, and refuse to make excuses become unstoppable in the pursuit of wealth, security, and financial mastery, because they understand that the power to shape their economic destiny is in their hands, that every action matters, that every decision counts, and that by taking full responsibility for their financial life, they transform not only their wealth, but their mindset, habits, character, and ultimately their destiny, proving once and for all that true financial success is not about luck, circumstance, or entitlement, but about ownership, accountability, and relentless personal initiative. And this is the timeless, powerful principle that separates those who merely struggle, drift, or hope from those who achieve, thrive, and command their financial destiny.